and I haven't had one for a couple months. So I thought it would be good to just check in and to get a state of the union for all y'all. My intent for the day is for you to be able to hear from one another about what's going on in your organizations, get ideas from one another, brainstorm, discuss best practices. And then I have a little bit of content that I want to share with you to kind of just remind you where we are in space in terms of emergency fundraising and some things that you can do to keep pushing your own fundraising efforts forward. Sound good?
Yep.
Okay. So if you saw the invite to this, you saw that I had a series of questions for the group. And what I'd like to do is break you up into small groups.
Take on Tuesday and Wednesday to help prepare her. So, and take her up to school. Just so you know.
I'm not sure who was that. Okay. So to help break you into small groups, and we'll start with the first three questions. So introduce yourself to one another, and then we'll talk about the first three questions, and we'll all come back as a group and share what we were discussing in our small groups. And then I'll break you apart into different small groups where you can talk about the last two questions. You should know that part of the content for today was born out of the fact that I've been working with a number of different community foundations who are very keen, and Sheila is a representative of one today, the Olympic View Community Foundation, and they've been very keen to help nonprofits. And so the last question is, you know, what can foundations or other community foundations be doing to support you in this time? So that's information that I would like to gather so that I can share with many of the organizations that I've been working with that are really, really keen to help support you, but might be looking for ways to do that. That's a good fit and authentic for what your needs are right now. So, okay, we're ready? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna first put you in the small group, and then I'm gonna, through the chat feature, share the first three questions so you all have access to it. You might want someone to take notes just to, so that you can keep track of your thoughts. And you'll have like a good chunk of time, like 7-ish minutes or so to get through the three questions, maybe a little longer. I'll be checking in with each of the groups as we do it. So just remember to introduce yourselves, to talk about where you're from, what's going on, answer the questions, and then we'll come back together, okay?
Sure.
Okay, rooms are created, and off you go. Eric, how did you go sideways?
I don't know, my phone. I'm probably gonna try to come in through my computer now. I was having some technical difficulties and I was rebooting it, so I jumped on via my phone. So you may see a request for me to come in again.
Oh, yep, there you are.
If you let me in, we'll see if that works any better.
Yeah. I just thought you somehow learned how to defy gravity. Go.
Defy gravity. I'll eliminate this one. I wish.
Welcome back, everyone. So does anyone want to share what they discussed with their group? Anything in particular around your ability to plan for the future?
Our group kind of just, the consensus was that no one can plan for the future right now. We're still in limbo.
Yeah. Are you doing anything, like, have you started to do like a 3-month plan, or are you just sort of like big shrug, question mark, you know?
I know for our organization, we have some things that's probably about 3 to 6 months out. Our fiscal year changed over with July 1st. We created a budget for the whole year, but our board said, hey, we know December we're going to check in and probably have to revise a lot of this. So we have some things that are about 3 months out that we're hopeful for, but we're kind of taking it a month at a time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is that true for the rest of you?
Yeah.
Anyone trying to do some strategic planning right now? Eric is? Phyllis is?
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
we are.
we were entering into our strategic plan ends in 2021, our 5-year strategic plan. So we were in the process before COVID, starting to assess and get ready for the next 5-year cycle. So we have to do something, or we're going to have no plan. So because that ends in 2021. So
Right.
Yeah.
this is our year to do that planning so that we're ready to go in 2021.
Phyllis, you too?
Yeah. Well, we, right before COVID hit, we did a 3-year plan. So we were just starting to implement that, but we are also in the process of merging with another organization. So that paperwork is in, and we're waiting until it gets approved. And then we have to combine those strategic plans. So we're in the middle of it.
Oh, yeah. And that's quite a lift during such a weird time.
Yes. Yeah, we're busier than usual.
So in fundraising, especially if you're doing things like major gift fundraising, there's sort of this like 90-day rule where if you implement an ask, or if you begin cultivating sort of a gift or start working with a donor, and this is specifically usually around major gifts, you can sort of expect the results of that to materialize within 90 days. So I don't know if that's helpful to you when you're thinking about an inability to plan, but knowing that especially when you're doing major gift work, that stuff takes a certain amount of time. So if you're thinking about reaching out to your donors, especially your major donors, but you're on the fence about whether or not to do that, my advice would be to go ahead and start conversations with them now, knowing that things might change and they might evolve. But if you wait to talk to them, you're just delaying the result that much further. So keep that in mind. What about additional bridge funding or asking donors to reallocate previous contributions? How many of you had to do some version of that? None? Melissa?
I did. Yeah, we did some. It was mainly around people that had bought tickets or paid for programs that we weren't able to fulfill, and asking them if they would potentially consider their purchase or their program purchase a donation to the organization.
Mm-hmm.
We were about half successful with that. So that worked. And then also sponsorships for an event that we said, could we repurpose your sponsorship money to operations?
And did they allow you to do that?
Yeah, they did. And I think everybody was just in sort of the state of like, oh, sure, no problem. And now it's 6 months later and nobody's sure what's going on. So I think they've hopefully just written it off like, all right, that was then, this is now, we'll just move forward.
Yeah. I sponsored an event that was supposed to happen this month that got canceled. And I told this organization that I would be happy because they're thinking about postponing it until the spring. And so I said, ask me again, because I might be able to do another gift in the spring. But if there's a way that you can do anything like a shout out on social media or put those sponsors in your newsletter now, even without the event, then it's much easier to go back next spring or next year and ask them for a second gift, because they will have gotten something out of it. And sponsorships are a little bit different than outright gifts, in that they do have sort of this expectation that there's going to be some public recognition. But because we're all on social media right now, because we're all having Zoom conversations, you can find ways to recognize those sponsors online, and then re-ask them. I mean, I didn't sponsor just so I could get recognition. You know, it's because I love the organization. So I'm happy to consider it if I'm not living in a van down by the river by then, which chances are pretty good that I won't be. So I think we're okay. Anyone else want to speak to having to ask for bridge funding or reallocate resources?
We did same with Melissa. We did with the sponsors that we had in our spring event. I think all of them actually said, go ahead and just keep the money.
Mm-hmm.
But now we're just starting the process of discussing doing a virtual art auction for the fall. So we'll see what that looks like, and trying to get sponsors for that. So that'll be interesting to see how that goes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, keep us posted.
I will. And we did art kits over the summer. I was telling my group, but I did get a new sponsor from that as well. And they want to continue the partnership to help with future programming. So
great.
That's a good thing to come out of that, which is great.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Mindy, we did our auction totally virtually online. This is Eric Chase from Children's Aid Society. So I'll shoot you my email in the chat, and if you want to connect, we can talk about that.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
That's great. For those of you that might not have asked sponsors to reallocate money, or you've postponed the event, I just want to encourage you that it is totally okay to have these kinds of conversations with your donors right now. You are being a good steward of your resources to ask them to give differently than they would have last year, given the current pandemic, and that is a good thing for you to do. They again, they sponsor your organization, you know, like the recognition is fine, but it's mostly because they care about what you're doing. And so I have had very, very rare times when people did not react positively to that kind of request. I mean, some might say, I'm sorry, we just can't give right now in that way. But I can think of one time in like the entire 30 years that I've been fundraising that someone was like cranky about that kind of request, and that had more to do with that person than and their finances and what their expectations were than it did the organization. So be emboldened to have those kind of conversations, and you don't even have to have a whole perfect plan in place. You can just say, we're trying to figure this out. Is there a way that you would like or be able to participate once we get, you know, more clarity on this?
I have a question about that. I'm on a board of an organization that relies heavily on sponsorships, and we've experienced just a lot of radio silence from a lot of corporate donors and schools, private schools that had been sponsors in the past and have just been like unresponsive, basically, to, you know, we lowered the levels, and, you know, we reached out like multiple times to kind of share our plans to have things held virtually instead, and what kinds of recognition they get instead, and just crickets. I'm curious if others have experienced that, like just not hearing back. No.
They might be 100% underwater, Anna.
Yeah.
They might just be so underwater that it's not registering, or they can't even begin to form a response because their own finances are in such disarray. I would imagine, especially with schools, they're like, their triage of things that they have to solve right now is pretty intense. And so a sponsorship request is probably at the bare bottom of the list. So I would give it like 60 days and maybe try again. And if that misses the window for that event, you know, then use that time to just show what you're still being able to accomplish, and then come back to them later in the fall. Yeah. I wouldn't lower the sponsorship rates any more than you already have, though, because that's not going to help you in the long run. Okay.
I just want to mention, we've been thinking about sponsor requests a little bit differently, because so many of our organizations are small businesses and who have been hit pretty hard. So rather than going out and asking for, you know, it's something like, could we partner together to get your message out, to get your business out? Could we do like a takeover where people come and, you know, buy your coffee and maybe we get a certain amount of money or something from each cup. So trying to think differently about how we can drive more business into their, you know, rather than just a logo recognition, but like literally get feet in their doors.
That's a great idea. Thanks.
One thing too I heard on a call recently was with auctions, especially businesses might not be apt to give you a gift card or a gift certificate or something because they're struggling themselves right now. So the suggestion was getting people that love you, like Danny and other board members, to actually go and buy a gift card for that business. So the gift card to the business is being supported, and then auctioning those gift cards, but giving Danny the credit for the gift. And you're selling that gift card and you're actually sending it back to the business. So it's a double win because that person feels good about buying you a gift card that you can then auction off. And it's just a neat way because a lot of businesses may say no to you right now because they're just struggling themselves. So it's a way of supporting your local businesses, but also getting some donors engaged in the process of doing that. So just an idea.
Yeah, brilliant. Love it. Any other thoughts about auction events? Okay. Just real quick, because I want to get to the second set of questions. Has COVID caused you to shift, add, or abandon your programs? And will you keep any of these changes once COVID is over? Yes, lots of people nodding yes. Anna, what did you shift?
So I mentioned in the group, we asked our physicians and mental health providers if they wanted continuing education trainings in the spring. And they said, no, not now. And so we've decided to postpone them to the fall. And now they're saying, yes, sort of, but we need very specific training about teletherapy and telehealth. So we've actually, I mean, normally we would do 6 a year or, you know, something like that. And this year I think we'll end up doing maybe 2. We're doing other kinds of trainings in other programs, but not as much of the open sort of everyone who's a physician can come to this training. It's not important to them right now. I mean, they still need their credits, but they're getting them in different ways. So we just said, fine, good time to just not do that.
Yeah, it's one less thing for you to have to do then too. Any others?
I said to our group that we do the Art in the Parks program typically face-to-face, but we decided to do it by handing out art kits. We partner with the York County Food Bank. So when the families are lined up for food, we'd be giving out art kits as well. And then we had a conversation just recently with the York City School District to do art kits for the kids, especially since the arts programs are getting cut, to provide art supplies to kids. So we're talking to more people in the community about getting those kits together and into kids' hands throughout the city.
Super, great. Okay, I'm gonna send you into groups. I'm gonna give you different groups this time so you get to talk to some different people, and then I'll shoot the 3 questions. So same format as just a little bit ago. And there you go.
stuff like that.
And I'm Deb Melissa, and I am the director of the Children's Advocacy Center here.
Nice to meet you.
Likewise.
So we're doing the other 2 questions. Is that
The other 3 questions, yeah.
3 questions. Okay.
Did you guys get the questions?
I don't have them.
I have them. I have them in front of me. How
Oh,
are you
great.
addressing DEI? How are you addressing DEI issues in your organization? What are DEI issues?
Did you
I
get
can just
questions?
share. Oh, hi, Danny.
Hi, did you get the questions?
I have the email open, so I'm just
Okay.
reading from there.
All right, you got it. So
Yeah. So in response to that, as an arts organization, we created an open call online exhibition for local artists to submit pieces.
That to see how that looks. So, oh, here's
Yeah.
Dan.
Here's-
Danny, what's DEI?
diversity, equity, inclusion.
Not what I thought at all.
No,
I'm like, I
No.
don't know what this is.
Yeah.
So I do have a response to that because we are forming an ad hoc committee. We just met with some community members, the same community members that people.
Staff, which is really kind of interesting process.
Yeah.
Sorry, I hopped out just as Eric was asking a question about DEI. Do you guys know the answer, or do you need?
Yeah.
Okay.
You got it.
I just learned the jargon. I had to use it.
We actually, for about a year, have been working on.
Myself wasn't.
See, this is why I need you. Okay, so group, what did you have to say about the diversity, equity, inclusion work that your organizations are doing? Well, let me ask it a different way. Who isn't doing any DEI work right now? No one, right? Is there anything in particular that you wish you had additional help or expertise in that area to figure out?
Well, I just spoke with Kelly Gibson a few weeks ago from the Cultural Alliance, and they're working on developing a program that we could talk about this with staff and board. So I think they're going to be sharing that with their partners, which we're one of the partners of the Cultural Alliance. So that'll be kind of trickling down to us, which is pretty exciting. And then we just literally formed an ad hoc committee with some community members to discuss these issues, and then move forward with what we need to address as far as having a more diverse staff and board and whatnot. So, which I'm really excited that, my board chair is really passionate about it as well. So I'm excited to take that forward and see what happens with that. So,
Great.
Yeah.
I know Work Wisdom, which is a Lancaster company, but they, like me, sort of do work all around the country. And they have some workshops and trainings on diversity, equity, and inclusion that are available as well. Kedron Crosby is the principal there. So if you're looking for another person or another group that could possibly provide assistance, they would be great.
Another good resource would be the YWCA. I know that they recently partnered with the City Alliance in Lancaster and did a really good presentation at one of their merchant meetings that I shared with all of my staff. And then they also supplied quizzes that you can take on implicit bias and all kinds of articles as a follow-up that we really delved into and brought up some good questions for our organization.
That's great. And I know the York YW has a lot of those same resources too that you could call on for help.
Abby was also, Dr. Monet was at her workshop with Melissa Plotkin, and like it was three people, or no?
No, it was, I think 4 people. And then because it was kind of specific to downtown Lancaster businesses too, they brought on a panel of 3 Lancaster residents that talked about their experiences in the business community as well.
That's cool.
Which was
Okay,
really insightful.
that's great. Okay.
Great. All right, and these are the 2 questions that I would like to take back to various foundations to give them information on how to better help you. So, are you seeking and willing to pay for outside expertise at this time? If so, what kind would you be looking for right now?
Our group said fundraising support, especially help with grant writing and like fund development planning, and that's often hard to get funded or have funding for.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about capacity building, also like the need to have a multi-year grant that you can prove it or get there, because often it's that, you know, here it is, okay, 1 year, and then it's over, and then you haven't been able to establish it enough to make it sustainable.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So even if it's you know, it's step down so you can get there, you know.
Yep.
Because I think it was Deb that shared, you said, Danny, it takes 3 years before a fundraiser starts producing. So you need to somehow fund that 3 years to get the fundraiser to start producing.
Yep, you absolutely do. I believe the Donnelly Foundation in York is starting to do some capacity granting along those lines. I think they're sort of in the baby stages of that. I know the United Services Foundation, which I think is in like, they have someone in Lancaster that lives there, but I think it's also in Maryland or something like that, but they do some capacity building funding as well. And I think, Melissa, you were talking about the Murdoch Foundation. So there could be some options in addition to others. What other things would you like to seek expertise on?
One of the areas that we've been seeking expertise on is sort of improving and professionalizing our presentation online. So that involved bringing in someone to film video so that the lighting and the sound and everything was just right for a virtual annual meeting that we did back in July. We also got a sound engineer to help us with the production of online audio-based walking tour that we just launched last week. And there's some issues with our website and the content management system and not being able to really control everything. And so we're going to be looking to redo at least parts of our website, if not the whole thing, in the next month or so, just because it's not working for our audience.
Yeah.
I second digital. I mean, all aspects like you just mentioned, Abby. So filming, editing, even like online store setup. So we have all this merchandise in our gift shop, and I've been trying to teach myself how to figure out the right way to sell it. I just don't have time to do that in addition to all the other stuff. And then also digital asset management. So we have all these pictures on all these hard drives and no cloud-based system. So everyone's working from different offices. And we're like, do you have this picture? Can you email that to me? We've never needed it because we've all been sitting in the same office and it hasn't been a problem. And now our digital presence is essentially almost our only presence. And so we need to have that element be more professionalized and more workable for the staff.
Mm-hmm. A note about that. So one of the things I wanted to make sure that I could reinforce is that if you don't already have a case statement right now, and I'm not talking about a capital campaign case statement, I'm talking about a more basic articulation of your current funding needs at this time, likely as a result of COVID. It's a good idea to write one. And if you wanted to specifically write a case around your digital needs or your communications needs, that could be really helpful in helping you to figure out, one, if there are vendors in your area that you might be able to approach for in-kind donations, and in exchange, they would get some good PR and all that good stuff. Or going to some of your funders or donors and asking them to make special one-time gifts in this area, because the pandemic really is requiring us to level up in an area that we weren't as dependent on in the past because we were more reliant on the face-to-face or real life experiences. So I have 2 articles on my website about how to write an annual case statement. And then of course I can help you write them, but if you want to try to do it without, me, there are 2 articles. It's like a part 1 and part 2 on creating an annual case statement for yourselves. Other funding expertise? Okay, and then the last question is, how would you like foundations and other funders to help you right now that might be different from how they've done it in the past?
Danny, in our group, we were talking about that a lot of times community foundations like new projects.
Mhm.
They want innovation and better ways to do things. And I think right now, a lot of the organizations, what we need is money just to fund administrative staff, since many can't do events, which a lot of times were that extra money that you could use to to pay for administration or staff, program staff, that if the foundations now could say, just send us a proposal, what do you need to keep your organization whole, would be extremely helpful, I think, for a lot of us right now.
Yeah. Almost like a nonprofit version of a PPP grant.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
That's a good idea. Other thoughts? You're all in agreement that that's what you need right now? Are there any other trainings or anything like that that you would like them to do for you? Okay, just blank checks, basically, unrestricted funds. Got it. I will send that back. That does sort of, there's an organization now, many of you have probably heard of it. It's called Community-Centric Fundraising, and it's a movement that's sort of been born out of this diversity, equity, and inclusion moment that we're having right now. And one of the elements to that in terms of nonprofit organizations is the ways in which our fundraising and our reliance on gifts and people of wealth can make the power structure within a nonprofit really wonky. And that's especially true if you have donors that are only providing restricted gifts, right? So so they, I think there's an appetite and there's a growing awareness of the value of pure unrestricted money for organizations. And all that is to say is, if you're having conversations with your donors about the organizational needs, I think more and more of them are going to be receptive to that. Can you please just write us a check to the organization and trust that we're going to know how to use that money to help keep the organization whole and move it forward? When I was living in Seattle, there was a pretty strong movement away from restricted donations, and they were getting much more about unrestricted gifts. But here in Pennsylvania, and I think in other parts of the country, there's still sort of this mindset of like donors don't want to pay for administrative costs. They want to fund the programs, except for the fact that now's the time that we get to educate donors on like, our people are our programs, and we can't serve the community if we can't pay the staff, if we can't keep the facility running in the way they need. So if you're writing a case statement, it is good and right and appropriate to put language around unrestricted gifts into that case statement as well. All right, can I borrow 4 more minutes because I want to just show you one last thing before we wrap up. And that is, I'm going to share my screen and then I'll send this as a follow-up email because there's a whole document about it, or it's a whole PDF, not just the first page. So many of you have seen this diagram, yeah? So the fundraising during a crisis, and people, we are in phase 2. I think we are solidly in the slump. We saw some of the wonderful generosity that came, in March, April, May, and now we're going into this time where it's starting to feel harder and donors' attention is waning, or they're starting to get more concerned about their own finances, and they're being a little bit, having more of a gimlet eye about where they're sending their fundraising. So I just wanted to remind you that phase 2 is a slump, but phase 3 is coming. So this is a time-bound moment, even if it feels like a very long time, it's still time-bound, and that there is recovery on the horizon. And the things that you can do to help mitigate against the slump is to continue to talk to your donors, specifically around what their gifts, and in particular the gifts during phase 1, have done to help keep the organization moving forward in this time. So really underscoring the donor impact on the organization. And then as much as possible, real-time updates on the changes that you're making, the pivots that you're taking, any new decisions that you're having to do to continue to move the organization forward. All of the research shows that the more that you keep donors engaged, and so that means ramping up your newsletters, ramping up your board thank you calls, you know, specifically around the impact, the more they're going to stick with you. And so that as their personal finances recover, they're going to be more likely to lean in with extra generosity. And even now, there are people in our community who aren't impacted in the way that others are. And so we want to have conversations with them so that we can get their gifts. Remembering that if you start the conversation now with someone as a potential major donor, it could take 90 days to realize. So you, to use the time this summer to do some of those conversations would be beneficial. This PDF from Jeff Brooks Fundraising actually has a lot of really great material in it. So I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna send you a link to the whole PDF that you can download, because he basically reiterates what I just said, but gives you some concrete things that you can do. So I'll make sure that you have this whole thing. Any other questions or comments that you want me to take back to funders before we leave today?
Danny, I just have a question about, you said it was the community center. What was the name of that organization?
Which organization?
The one that's looking at the issue of equity in the whole.
Oh, community-centric fundraising.
Centric, okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
And hold on, I can get you the email address. The website is communitycentricfundraising.org.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions, comments? Good for the group? Okay, well, thanks for joining me today. I hope it was good for you guys to talk to one another and great experiences from across the country. And I'll be reaching out in a couple months with something new, so stay tuned.
Thanks, Danny.
Yep.
Thanks, Danny.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.